Satan, the embodiment of evil, the deceiver. But Jesus is saying, be like the serpent. Be wise like the serpent. Why? Because the serpent told humans to seek knowledge, to eat from the tree, to learn, to grow, to stop being ignorant. The church teaches that eating from the tree of knowledge was the worst thing humanity ever did, the original sin, the fall from grace. Jesus teaches that seeking knowledge is how you become free. Religious authorities hide knowledge from you. They keep you ignorant. They don't use the keys themselves, and they won't let you use them either. But you should be wise. You should seek knowledge, even if it means disobeying false authorities, even if it means questioning what you've been told. They are teaching the complete opposite message. The church says, obey, don't question, believe what we tell you. Jesus says, question everything, seek knowledge, think for yourself, be wise. Here's saying number 13, and this one is absolutely crucial. Jesus said to his disciples, compare me to someone and tell me whom I am like. Simon Peter said to him, you are like a righteous angel. Matthew said to him, you are like a wise philosopher. Thomas said to him, Master, my mouth is wholly incapable of saying whom you are like. Jesus said, I am not your master, because you have drunk and become intoxicated from the bubbling spring which I have measured out. Do you hear what he just said? I am not your master. He's rejecting the idea of being worshipped. He's rejecting the idea of being put on a pedestal. He's saying, I've found a source of wisdom, a bubbling spring of knowledge, and I've drunk from it, and now I'm sharing it with you. You can drink from the same spring. I'm not special. I'm not your master. I just figured something out, and I'm showing you how to figure it out too. That's the message. Not worship me, not pray to me, not believe I'm God and you're not. Learn what I learned. Access what I accessed. Become what I became. You have the same potential. But of course, that message had to be destroyed. Because if Jesus isn't special, if everyone has the same potential, then what's the point of the institution? What's the point of the hierarchy? What's the point of priests and bishops and popes claiming special authority? Now at this point, you might be thinking, okay, interesting historical documents, fascinating alternative perspective, but how do we know this is the real story and the Bible isn't? So let me show you something that removes all doubt. Let me show you evidence that's not based on which texts you believe, or which interpretation you accept. Let me show you mathematical proof, astronomical proof, that Christianity as you know it is coded sun worship from ancient Egypt and Babylon. A researcher named Jordan Maxwell spent 60 years studying ancient religions, symbols, mystery schools, astronomy. He wasn't religious. He wasn't trying to prove or disprove anything. He was just looking at patterns, looking at evidence, looking at what the historical record actually shows. And what he discovered is that every major element of the Jesus story matches ancient astronomical patterns, not history, not biography, astronomy. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Jesus' birthday, according to Christian tradition, is December 25th. Now let's look at what's actually happening astronomically on December 25th. December 21st or 22nd is the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year in the northern hemisphere. After the winter solstice for 3 days, December 22nd, 23rd, 24th, the sun appears to stop moving south. It seems to pause at its lowest point in the sky. And then, on December 25th, it begins moving north again. It's reborn. It resurrects. The sun dies for 3 days and is resurrected on the 25th. The Son of God dies for 3 days and is resurrected. Same pattern, same symbolism, same story. Now you might say that's just coincidence. So let's keep going. Jesus traveled with 12 disciples. The sun travels through 12 zodiac constellations every year. The sun is always surrounded by 12 signs. Jesus is always surrounded by 12 disciples. Coincidence? Let's go deeper. Due to the wobble of Earth's axis, something called the precession of the equinoxes, The sun's position at the spring equinox slowly shifts through the zodiac constellations. Each age lasts about 2,160 years. From about 4,300 to 2,150 BC, we were in the age of Taurus the bull. And what do you see in ancient religions from that time? Bull worship, the golden calf, Apis, the sacred bull in Egypt. Taurus symbolism everywhere. From 2150 BC to about 1 AD, we were in the age of Aries the ram. And what shows up? Ram's horns, the shofar in Judaism, sheep sacrifice, Aries symbolism. Then around 1 AD, we enter the age of Pisces the fish. And suddenly the symbol of Christianity is a fish. Jesus says, "I will make you fishers of men." The miracle of loaves and fishes. Fish symbolism everywhere. And Jesus himself says in the Gospel of Matthew, "I am with you always until the end of the age." Not the end of the world. The end of the age. That's astronomical terminology. He's talking about the age of Pisces. But it goes even deeper than that. Let's look at the actual words you use. The word amen that Christians say at the end of every prayer. Where does that come from? It comes from Amun-Ra, the Egyptian sun god, the hidden god. Every single time a Christian says amen, they are invoking the name of an Egyptian deity. The word Easter, the resurrection holiday, where does that come from? Ishtar, the Babylonian goddess of fertility. That's why you have eggs and rabbits at Easter. Those are fertility symbols from the original pagan festival. The word church, where you go to worship, comes from the Greek word kyriakon, which means house of the Lord. But Lord doesn't mean God. It means property owner, landlord. When you enter a church, you're entering the Lord's house. You're on his property. You're subject to his authority. Vatican, the seat of Catholic power, comes from Vaticanus, the name of an Etruscan goddess of the underworld. The Vatican literally means place of divination, or place of the dead. None of this is hidden. It's right there in the language. It's right there in the dates. It's right there in the symbols. They just bet that you would never look it up. They bet that you would accept what you were told and never question it. And they were right about 99% of people. But you're not most people. You're still here. You're still listening. You're still questioning. So if Christianity is coded sun worship, if the church was created by the empire that killed Jesus, if the words themselves reveal pagan origins, then what was Jesus actually teaching? What was the real message that was so dangerous they had to bury it under layers and layers of mythology? This is where Professor Jiang's research becomes absolutely profound. He spent 20 years analyzing ancient wisdom traditions, Plato, Buddha, Lao Tzu, Zoroaster, the Stoics, the mystery schools of Egypt and Greece. And he found something extraordinary. They all teach the same core truth. They use different words, different metaphors, different cultural contexts. But the fundamental teaching is identical. Here it is. Consciousness is fundamental. The material world, the physical universe, all the stuff you can touch and see, that's temporary, that's constantly changing, that comes and goes. But your consciousness, your awareness, the fact that you are experiencing reality right now, that's what's real. That's what matters. You have something inside you that can't be destroyed. Your body will die. Your physical form will return to the earth. But the part of you that's aware, the part that's conscious, that continues in some form, whether you call it a soul or spirit or energy or information, something continues. The material world is a trap. Chasing money, power, status, other people's approval, it's all empty. It doesn't lead to fulfillment. It doesn't make you happy. It's like drinking salt water when you're thirsty. It seems like it should satisfy you, but it just makes you more desperate. And knowledge is freedom. Don't obey blindly. Don't accept what authorities tell you just because they claim to have special access to truth. Question, learn, grow. Think for yourself. Buddha called this enlightenment, the realization that the self is an illusion and suffering comes from attachment. Plato called it remembering the forms, the idea that true reality exists in a realm of perfect ideals, and we're just seeing shadows on the cave wall. The Stoics called it living according to nature, aligning yourself with the rational order of the universe. Jesus was teaching the same thing, adapted for his time, his place, his audience, his cultural context. But here's what made Jesus different. He was teaching this under Roman occupation, and the Roman system of control was based on two things: fear and reward. Obey, or we kill you. Obey, and we'll give you status and security. But Jesus taught, death doesn't matter because your consciousness can't be destroyed. Wealth doesn't matter because the material world is temporary. Which means Rome has zero leverage over you. From the Gospel of Thomas, saying number 56, whoever has come to understand the world has found only a corpse, and whoever has found a corpse is superior to the world. The world, the empire, the system of power and money and status, it's spiritually dead. It's a corpse. And once you see that, once you really understand that, you're free. You're superior to the world. Not because you're better than other people, but because you're no longer controlled by the world's rewards and punishments. This is like the Matrix. As long as you believe the Matrix is real, it controls you. It can threaten you with death and you're terrified. It can offer you power and you're seduced. But once you wake up and realize it's not real, once you see it for what it is, it has no power over you. You're free. And a free person is the most dangerous thing to an empire. Think about this practically in your own life right now. What controls you? What makes you anxious, stressed, afraid? For most people, it's things like, I need more money, or I need people to approve of me, or I need to maintain my status, or I'm afraid of losing what I have, or I'm afraid of death. But if you really understood, really internalized, that your consciousness can't be destroyed, that material things don't bring fulfillment, that other people's opinions are just noise, how would you live differently? What would you do if you weren't afraid? What would you create if you didn't need approval? Who would you become if you stopped chasing empty status? That's what Jesus was teaching people. And Rome watched slaves who suddenly didn't fear death. They watched poor people who suddenly didn't envy the rich. They watched oppressed people who suddenly weren't bitter or vengeful. And Rome panicked. Because the entire system depends on people being afraid and desperate. If people aren't afraid, you can't control them with threats. If people aren't desperate, you can't control them with rewards. And then there's the most radical teaching of all. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Now on the surface, that sounds weak. It sounds passive, like you're just letting evil people win. But it's actually the most psychologically sophisticated teaching in human history. Let me explain why. If you hate your enemy, they control you. They live in your head. They dictate your emotional state. You think about them constantly. You fantasize about revenge. You're consumed by anger and bitterness. They have power over you even when they're not physically present. But if you can genuinely let go, if you can look at your enemy with understanding or even compassion, you're free. They no longer control your inner state. Think about someone in your life who hurt you. Maybe it was years ago. But when you think about them, you still feel that anger rising up, right? Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense. You replay what happened. You imagine what you should have said or done. That person is controlling you right now, in this moment, even though they might not even remember what they did. As long as you hold on to that hate, they have power over you. But forgiveness isn't about them. It's not about saying what they did was okay. It's about freeing yourself from their control. It's about cutting that energetic cord so they can't pull your strings anymore. And here's the really deep part. When you look at people who do evil things, people who hurt others, people who abuse power. If you really look, you'll see they're suffering. They're trapped in their own prison. They can't trust anyone. They're paranoid. They're empty inside. They're spiritually dead. The Roman emperors had all the power in the world, but they lived in constant fear of assassination. They couldn't eat food without poison testers. They couldn't trust their own family members. They were isolated, paranoid, miserable. They had everything, and they had nothing. So when Jesus says, love your enemies, he's not saying let them hurt you. He's saying understand that they're suffering more than you are. They've destroyed their own souls in the pursuit of power. You might be their victim, but at least you're still alive inside. At least you can still feel love and joy and connection. They can't. And when you see that, when you really understand that, the hate dissolves. Not because you're trying to be a good person, but because you genuinely feel sorry for them. You see them as pitiful rather than powerful. And that shifts everything. Suddenly you're not controlled by them anymore. You're free. And freedom of consciousness is the most dangerous thing in the world to people who want to control you. So Rome killed Jesus around 30 AD because he was teaching people to be free. And then for 300 years, his message kept spreading. His brother James led the original movement. People were being transformed by these teachings. And Rome tried killing more people, but that just created more martyrs. So they did something brilliant and evil. They took over the movement from the inside. They created an official version of Christianity that taught the opposite. Instead of you are divine, it became only Jesus is divine. Instead of question and seek knowledge, it became obey and have faith. Instead of you don't need an institution, it became you must go through the church to be saved. And they destroyed every text that contradicted this new version. But some of those texts survived, hidden in jars, buried in caves. And in 1945, a farmer found them. And now you know what they say. You know what was buried. You know what they tried to erase. But there's one more question we need to address. And it's the darkest question. If these texts existed, if people knew Jesus taught freedom and inner power, why did most people accept the church's version? Why did they choose obey and be saved over think and be free? The Russian novelist Dostoevsky wrote a story in 1880 that explains this better than anything else I've ever read. It's called The Grand Inquisitor. It's fiction, but it cuts to the core of human psychology in a way that's absolutely devastating. Here's the story. Jesus returns to Earth during the Spanish Inquisition in the 1500s. People recognize him immediately. He starts healing the sick, raising the dead, performing the same miracles as before, and everyone is celebrating. But the head of the Catholic Church, the Grand Inquisitor, has him arrested. And that night, the Inquisitor goes to Jesus' cell, and he says, "We know who you are. We recognize you, and we're going to have to burn you at the stake tomorrow, because you're a threat to the happiness of the people." Jesus is confused. He thought he came to save people. But the Inquisitor explains. He says, "You came to give people freedom. You told them, think for yourselves, find your own truth, take responsibility for your own choices. But people don't want that. People don't want freedom. Freedom is terrifying. Freedom means having to decide what's right and wrong on your own. It means living with the consequences of your choices. It means bearing the weight of responsibility for your own life. Most people can't handle that. Most people would rather be told what to do, what to believe, how to live. Before you came, the Inquisitor says, we had simple rules. Obey these commandments. Follow these rituals. Believe these doctrines. And people were grateful. Life was simple. They knew what to do. But then you came along and said, no. The kingdom is within you. You have to find it yourself. You have to think for yourself. You have to question everything. And that threw people into chaos. That gave them anxiety. That made them feel lost and overwhelmed. So we fixed it. We created miracle, mystery, and authority. We gave them miracles to believe in so they don't have to think. We gave them mystery so they accept what they can't understand. We gave them authority so they have someone to obey. And they're happy now. They're grateful. We lifted that terrible burden of freedom from their shoulders. And then the Inquisitor asks Jesus, were we wrong? Don't we love mankind by protecting them from the suffering that freedom brings? You gave them a gift they couldn't handle. We took it away and gave them what they actually wanted. Peace. Certainty. Someone to tell them what to do. Why have you come back to ruin that? And here's the devastating part. The Inquisitor is right. Think about your own life. How many times have you just wanted someone to tell you what to do? Should I take this job? Should I stay in this relationship? Should I move to this city? What should I major in? What career should I pursue? Making your own choices is hard. It's scary. What if you're wrong? What if you mess up? What if you choose badly and ruin your life? Wouldn't it be easier if someone just told you the right answer? Wouldn't it be more comfortable if there was a rule book you could follow and be guaranteed a good outcome? That's what most people want. That's what the church provided. A clear set of rules. Believe these things, do these rituals, obey these authorities, and you'll be saved. Simple, easy, no ambiguity. And most people gladly accepted that trade. They gave up freedom in exchange for certainty. That's why people stay in jobs they hate, because choosing to leave is scary. That's why people stay in bad relationships, because being alone feels worse than being unhappy. That's why people follow influencers and gurus blindly, because thinking for yourself is exhausting. That's why people join cults, because having someone tell you you're special, you're chosen, you're part of the elect, that feels better than the terrifying uncertainty of freedom. The Inquisitor finishes his argument. He's made his case. He's explained why the church had to bury Jesus' real teaching. He's shown why people prefer control to freedom. And he waits for Jesus to respond. He wants Jesus to defend freedom, to argue why it's worth the suffering, to justify why he gave people such a terrible burden. But Jesus doesn't say anything. He doesn't argue. He doesn't defend himself. He just walks up to the old man, this grand inquisitor who's built an entire empire of control, who's convinced himself he's doing it out of love. And Jesus kisses him softly on the lips. That's it. That's his response. And the old man shudders. Something in him breaks for just a moment. The kiss says, I understand. I see why you did this. I know you thought you were helping, and I forgive you. The Inquisitor's logic was sound. His arguments were rational. Most people do prefer to be told what to do, but Jesus doesn't fight logic with logic. He demonstrates something beyond logic: compassion, love, forgiveness. The Inquisitor orders him released. He says, go away, don't come back, leave us alone. This is not your world anymore, this is our world. And Jesus leaves. The kiss glows in the old man's heart. He felt something, a spark of something he'd buried long ago. But he doesn't change. He adheres to his system, because changing would mean admitting he was wrong. And he's built too much on being right. Now here's why I'm telling you this story. Because right now, in this moment, you have a choice. And it's the same choice everyone has always had. You can be like the masses who chose comfort over truth, who chose certainty over freedom, who chose to be told what to think rather than figure it out themselves. Or you can be like the rare few who choose the harder path, who choose to question, who choose to seek, who choose to think for themselves, even when it's uncomfortable and scary and uncertain. And I'm going to be honest with you. Most people watching this right now will choose the first path. They'll close this video. They'll decide it's all speculation or conspiracy theory or whatever. Lets them go back to sleep. And that's okay. That's their choice. That's their freedom. But if you're still here, if you've made it this far, it means something in you is different. Something in you values truth over comfort. Something in you is willing to question what you've been told. Something in you is strong enough to handle uncertainty. And that's rare. That's powerful. That's dangerous to any system that wants to control you. So let me tell you what this means for your life. Let me tell you what changes when you really integrate this understanding. For the last 50 minutes, I've shown you documented evidence that Christianity as you know it was created by the Roman Empire to control people. I've shown you the texts they buried and what those texts actually teach. I've shown you astronomical. I've shown you astronaut. 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 What are you going to do with this information? You have two paths in front of you right now. Path number one, you can close this video and go back to your life exactly as it was. You can decide that questioning your beliefs is too uncomfortable, too destabilizing, too risky. You can keep chasing status, keep seeking approval, keep believing you need external authorities to validate you or save you, or tell you what to think. That's a valid choice. Millions of people make it every single day. It's the safer path, the more comfortable path. Or path number two, you can let this change you. You can start living differently starting tomorrow. And here's what that looks like practically. You stop outsourcing your thinking to authorities. When someone tells you what to believe, you ask, what's the evidence? When someone claims to have the truth, you ask, how do you know? When an institution demands obedience, you ask, who benefits from my obedience? You stop chasing empty status. You stop measuring your worth by how much money you have, or what job title you hold, or how many followers you have, or what car you drive. You start measuring your life by different metrics. Am I growing? Am I learning? Am I creating something meaningful? Am I building real relationships? Am I becoming wiser, more conscious, more free? You stop fearing things that don't actually threaten what's real in you. Death becomes less scary when you understand consciousness can't be destroyed. Failure becomes less terrifying when you understand it's just feedback, just information, just part of the learning process. Other people's opinions become less powerful when you understand they're just reflections of their own fears and desires. And you start seeking knowledge instead of comfort. You read books that challenge you. You expose yourself to ideas that make you uncomfortable. You question your own beliefs as rigorously as you question others. You become a perpetual student, always learning, always growing, always evolving. And here's what happens when you live this way. You stop being easy to control. Politicians can't manipulate you with fear because you're not afraid of the things they threaten you with. Advertisers can't manipulate you with desire because you're not chasing the status they're selling. Institutions can't manipulate you with guilt because you don't accept their authority to judge you. You become dangerous. Not dangerous in the sense that you're going to hurt people. Dangerous in the sense that you can't be controlled. You think for yourself. You make your own choices. You live according to your own values instead of someone else's script. And that's exactly what got Jesus killed. That's exactly what these texts were buried for. That's exactly what empires have tried to suppress for 2,000 years. Not because it's false, but because it's threatening to power. A population of free-thinking, self-directed, internally validated people cannot be controlled. They don't obey out of fear. They don't comply out of desperation for approval. They make their own choices based on their own understanding. That's revolutionary. That's dangerous. That's exactly what the system doesn't want. Now, I want to be completely real with you about something. This path is not easy. If you choose to question, if you choose to think for yourself, if you choose to live according to your own values, you're going to face resistance. Your family might not understand why you're questioning things they've believed their whole lives. Your friends might think you've become weird, or arrogant, or lost. The culture will push back because it wants you to conform, to fit in, to be like everyone else. You might go through periods of deep uncertainty where you don't know what to believe anymore, and that feels terrifying. You might lose relationships with people who can't handle you changing and growing. You might face practical consequences for not going along with what everyone else accepts. This is the burden of freedom that the Grand Inquisitor talked about. This is why most people choose the other path. But here's what I want you to understand. That difficulty, that resistance, that uncertainty, it's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're doing something real. Growth is uncomfortable. Transformation is messy. Becoming free is scary. But on the other side of that discomfort is a kind of aliveness that most people never experience. A kind of authenticity that most people never achieve. A kind of freedom that most people never taste. When you stop living for other people's approval, you find out who you really are. When you stop chasing status markers, you discover what actually matters to you. When you stop accepting what you're told and start seeking truth for yourself, you develop a relationship with reality that's direct and immediate, instead of mediated through authorities. And that changes everything. You start making choices based on understanding instead of fear. You start creating a life based on meaning instead of obligation. You start becoming who you actually are instead of who you were told to be. And I'm not saying you become perfect. I'm not saying you never struggle or doubt or fall back into old patterns. I'm saying you become real. You become authentic. You become free in a way that most people never even know is possible. Professor Jiang didn't have to give that lecture in 2019. He could have kept his research to himself. He could have played it safe, stuck to approved topics, protected his career and his reputation. But he chose to share what he'd discovered. Even knowing it would cause controversy, even knowing institutions would push back, even knowing he might face consequences. Why? Because he understood that this knowledge doesn't belong to institutions or authorities. It belongs to you. It belongs to anyone brave enough to seek it. It belongs to anyone willing to question what they've been told and look at the evidence for themselves. And that's why I'm sharing this with you today. Not because I need you to believe everything I've said. Not because I want to replace one set of beliefs with another. But because I want you to know that you have the capacity to think for yourself. You have the ability to examine evidence and draw your own conclusions. You have the right to question authorities who claim to have truth while burning contradictory evidence. Whether you're Christian or atheist or Buddhist or Muslim or agnostic or anything else, this message is the same. Don't let others do your thinking for you. Don't accept what you're told just because someone claims authority. Don't live in fear of illusions. Seek knowledge. Question authority. Think for yourself. Examine evidence. Draw your own conclusions. Live according to your own understanding. That's what Jesus taught according to these buried texts. That's what got him killed. That's what they tried to erase from history. That's what you're capable of right now. And here's what I want you to understand in your bones. You are not weak. You are not helpless. You are not dependent on external authorities to tell you what's true or what matters or how to live. You have consciousness. You have the ability to think and reason and question and learn and grow. You have access to the same source of wisdom that every great teacher throughout history has accessed. Whether you call it God or the universe or consciousness or the divine spark or enlightenment or your higher self, you have access to it. Right now. Not after you die. Not after you join the right institution. Not after you believe the right doctrines. Right now. It's already within you. You just have to turn your attention inward and discover it. And when you do that, when you really do that inner work, you become ungovernable. Not in the sense that you break laws or hurt people, but in the sense that you can't be manipulated. You see through the fear tactics. You see through the desire manipulation. You see through the guilt trips and the shame and the social pressure and the appeals to authority. You see it all for what it is. Attempts to control you. Attempts to get you to obey. Attempts to keep you small and afraid and dependent. And once you see it, it doesn't work anymore. You're free. And a free person is the most powerful force in the world. Not powerful in the sense of having control over others, but powerful in the sense of being fully alive, fully authentic, fully human. Powerful in the sense of creating and loving and growing and contributing something real to the world instead of just consuming and obeying and going through the motions. So here's my challenge to you. Prove them wrong. Prove that you're not like the masses who prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. Prove that you're strong enough to question what you've been taught. Prove that you value truth over security. Prove that you can think for yourself. How do you do that? You start questioning. Today, right now. Take one belief you've never questioned and ask, how do I know this is true? What's the evidence? Who benefits from me believing this? Take one authority figure you've always trusted and ask, why do I trust them? Have they ever been wrong? What incentives do they have? Take one fear that controls you and ask, is this fear based on reality or manipulation? What would I do if I wasn't afraid of this? And then you seek knowledge, real knowledge. Not just information that confirms what you already believe, but information that challenges you. Read books from multiple perspectives. Study history. Look at evidence. Learn how to think critically, how to evaluate sources, how to distinguish between what's actually true and what people want you to believe. And you start living according to your own understanding. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but authentically. Making choices based on what you actually value instead of what you think you're supposed to value. Creating a life that reflects who you actually are instead of who you were told to be. And when you do this, something magical happens. You stop being a sheep. You become a shepherd of your own life. You stop being controlled by fear and desire and social pressure. You become... What if I told you there's a hidden power inside your mind right now? A force, an actual engine, a biological, spiritual, electromagnetic power source that determines the quality of every single thing you experience. Your relationships, your bank account, your health, your peace, your purpose. All of it, every bit of it, is being shaped right now by whether this internal force is activated or lying dormant like a sleeping giant you never knew existed. And here's what nobody told you. This force has been known about for thousands of years. It was encoded into symbols, hidden in rituals, protected by secret societies who understood something that modern education deliberately left out. The most powerful of these societies, the Freemasons, and the most misunderstood symbol they ever created, a single letter, G. You've seen it, square and compass, that cryptic symbol, that mysterious letter sitting right in the center. Most people think it stands for God or geometry. Maybe some ancient secret they'll never understand. But here's the truth. It stands for something far more practical, far more immediate, far more dangerous to the systems that profit from you staying small. The G represents the generative force inside human consciousness, the internal power that generates reality from the inside out. Not someday, not in theory, right now, in your body, in your nervous system, in the invisible architecture of your mind. And if you're over 45, still working harder than you ever have, still wondering when life is finally going to click, still feeling like something's missing, even though you've done everything right, then this force has been dormant your entire life. Not because you're broken, not because you're unlucky, because nobody taught you it existed. But that changes today. By the end of this transmission, you'll understand exactly what the Masons knew. You'll see why they protected it, And more importantly, you'll learn how to turn it on, tonight, tomorrow, this week, so that reality starts bending in your favor instead of against you. Because here's what they don't want you to know. You were never supposed to struggle this long. Let that sink in. Let's start with what they told you. God, geometry, gnosis, generation, generosity. Ask 10 Masons what the G stands for. You'll get 10 different answers. And here's the wild part. They're all correct. Why? Because they all point to the same invisible mechanism. The Freemasons weren't worshipping a god outside themselves. They were studying the God force inside consciousness itself, the creative principle, the part of you that doesn't just experience reality, it generates it. But before we go deeper, let me show you something that'll blow your mind. The secret list you were never supposed to see. Here's a partial list of men who were Freemasons. George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Theodore Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Gerald Ford, Winston Churchill, Mozart, Mark Twain, Henry Ford, Walt Disney. Now, some people see that list and think, oh, it's just a club for successful people. But flip it around. These weren't successful men who joined the Masons. These were men who learned the principles of the Masons and then became successful. Because here's what nobody tells you. Masonic lodges weren't social clubs. They were training grounds. Training grounds for what? For mastering the internal mechanisms of reality creation. And the mechanism they were all taught? The G-force. Here's what the square and compass actually mean. You've seen the symbol, but do you know what it actually represents? The square represents the physical world, matter, form, the material plane. The compass represents consciousness, spirit, the realm of thought and imagination. And the G in the middle? That's the generative bridge between the two. It's the force that takes what exists in your mind, thought, emotion, vision, and solidifies it into physical reality. The Masons weren't being cryptic for fun. They were encoding a formula. Consciousness, compass, plus physical action, square, plus generative force, G equals manifestation. That's not mysticism, that's mechanics. And they spent 300 years teaching this to initiates behind closed doors, while the rest of the world stayed stuck in survival mode. Here's something the gurus won't tell you, because most of them are 28-year-olds who've never paid a mortgage or buried a parent. The G-force doesn't fully activate until you've lived enough life to understand what actually matters. When you're young, you want everything. Your desires are scattered. You're chasing status, approval, surface-level wins. But by 45, by 50, by 60, you know what's real. You know what's noise. You've felt loss. You've survived failure. You've buried dreams and raised kids and stared at yourself in the mirror at 3 a.m., wondering if this is really all there is. And that is when the G-force becomes accessible at its deepest level. Because the G-force doesn't respond to desperation. It responds to clarity. And you don't get clarity from reading books. You get it from living. The Masons understood this. That's why their system was built on degrees, levels of initiation that required time, experience, maturity. You couldn't skip to the 33rd degree at age 25. You had to earn the wisdom. And now you have it. You've earned it through decades of experience. The only problem? Nobody told you what to do with it. Until now. Listen closely, because this is where most people get lost. The G-force is not faith. It's not belief. It's not wishful thinking. It's the internal generator that turns attention into emotion, emotion into intention, and intention into physical action and result. Think of it like this. Your mind is not a receiver. It's a transmitter. Every thought you have, every feeling you carry, every focus you hold, it's broadcasting a signal. And reality is the echo, the mirror, the response. But here's the problem. Most people, especially people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, have been running the same signal for decades without realizing it. The same worries, The same doubts, the same stories, the same emotional frequency, and then they wonder why nothing changes. Let me show you the difference. Here are the signs of an activated G-force state. Thought becomes fuel, not noise. Emotion amplifies action instead of paralyzing you. Decisions happen fast because you trust yourself. Synchronicities increase, opportunities appear, energy flows instead of drains. You feel alive, not automated. Money flows easier because your frequency matches abundance. People treat you differently, with more respect, more deference. Problems solve themselves through unexpected pathways. Your intuition becomes eerily accurate. Here are the signs of a dormant G-force state. Endless mental loops with no action. Emotional flatness or reactive chaos. Analysis paralysis on every decision. Waiting for permission. Signs. Certainty. Exhaustion even when you're doing nothing. Life feels like it's happening to you, not through you. Money is always tight, no matter how much you make. You feel invisible, overlooked, dismissed. Every solution creates two new problems. You second-guess every instinct you have. Sound familiar? That second one, that's not depression. That's not aging. That's not just how life is. That's what happens when the most powerful force in your consciousness has been switched off for years. Here's the 33rd degree secret nobody talks about. You've heard of the 33rd degree Mason, right? The highest level. People think it's some Illuminati conspiracy, some secret cabal running the world. But here's what it actually represents. Complete mastery of the G-force. The 33 degrees aren't ranks of power. They're levels of consciousness. Each degree represents a deeper understanding of how to align thought, emotion, will, and action to create reality. By the time a Mason reaches the 33rd degree, they've spent decades training this internal force. Daily rituals, symbolic practices, conscious refinement of their mental and emotional state. And here's the kicker. They don't do this for money or status. They do it because they understand something most people never learn. Your internal state is the only thing that determines your external experience. Not your job, not your connections, not your circumstances, your consciousness. And once you master that, everything else becomes a side effect. The Masons knew this. They built entire systems around it. And now you're about to learn what took them centuries to codify. Let me ask you something. You went to school for years, right? Maybe even college. You learned math, history, science, how to follow instructions, how to show up on time, how to fit in. But did anyone ever teach you how your mind actually works? Not memorization, not logic. I mean the real stuff. How to manage your emotional state, how to direct your focus intentionally, how to train your imagination like a muscle, how to turn thought into deliberate action. No, they didn't. And it wasn't an accident. Here's something they don't teach in history class. The modern education system wasn't designed to create thinkers. It was designed to create workers. It's called the Prussian model. Developed in the 1800s specifically to produce obedient soldiers and factory workers. The goal wasn't education, it was standardization. Sit in rows, memorize information, don't question authority. Bell rings, you move. Bell rings, you stop. Sound familiar? That system was imported to America in the early 1900s. And it's the same system you went through. Now here's the dark part. The men who funded and pushed this system, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, they weren't sending their kids through it. Their kids got private tutors, classical education, philosophy, rhetoric, the kind of education that trains you to think, not obey. Why? Because they understood something. A person who masters their inner world cannot be controlled by the outer one. So they built a two-tier system. One tier for the masses, obedience training disguised as education. One tier for the elite, consciousness training disguised as classical studies. And guess which one you got? While the masses were being trained to follow orders, the Freemasons were building something else entirely. Not a school, an initiatory tradition, a lineage designed to rebuild men from the inside out. The rituals, the symbols, the degrees. It wasn't about secret handshakes or weird ceremonies. It was about systematically activating dormant human capacities. Specifically, emotional sovereignty, the ability to choose your state regardless of circumstances. Imaginative discipline, the ability to hold and refine a vision until it becomes real. Will cultivation, the ability to act on decision, not just motivation. Symbolic thinking, the ability to see patterns and meaning beyond the literal. These aren't soft skills. These are power skills. And they were deliberately kept out of public education. Why? Let me show you. Here's a question nobody wants you to ask. Who benefits from you feeling powerless? Think about it. If you knew, truly knew, that you could create your own reality through conscious direction of your internal state, would you stay in a job that drains you? Would you tolerate relationships that diminish you? Would you accept financial limitation as permanent? Would you buy products promising happiness? Would you need external validation from media, government, experts? No, you wouldn't. You'd become sovereign, and sovereign people don't make good consumers. They don't make compliant employees. They don't make easily controlled citizens. Sovereign people don't need saving. They don't wait for permission. They don't outsource their power. And the entire economic and political system is built on people doing exactly those things. Here's something wild. In the 1800s, Freemasonry was everywhere. Open, public. Most of the founding fathers were Masons, but by the mid-1900s, it went almost completely underground. Lodges closed, membership dropped. The public perception shifted from respected civic organization to weird secret society. What happened? Two things. First, the rise of mass media gave the system a new tool for control. Programming through entertainment and news. Why bother with lodges teaching men to think for themselves when you could just broadcast the thoughts you wanted them to have? Second, the consolidation of power into fewer hands meant that decentralized networks of conscious, empowered men became threats. The Masons weren't dangerous because they had secrets. They were dangerous because they were teaching regular men, plumbers, farmers, shopkeepers, how to access extraordinary power. And you can't control a population of men who've mastered their G-force. So the lodges faded, the teachings got diluted, and the masses were left with school, media, consumer culture, debt, distraction. But here's the insidious part. They didn't just take away the real training. They replaced it with counterfeits. Instead of emotional mastery, they gave you therapy culture, endless processing, no resolution. Instead of will cultivation, they gave you motivation porn, hype with no discipline. Instead of imaginative training, they gave you fantasy entertainment, passive consumption instead of active creation. Instead of conscious community, they gave you social media, connection without depth. And here's the result. You're 45, 55, 65 years old. You've worked your ass off. You've done everything they told you to do. And you're tired, stressed, wondering why it still doesn't feel like enough. Not because you failed, because the game was rigged from the start. They gave you a map that leads nowhere, and then blamed you for being lost. But here's what they didn't count on. You're waking up. You're starting to see the patterns, the programming, the invisible cage. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's what brought you here. That's what this moment is. You're done with the counterfeit. You're ready for the real thing. And the real thing? It's been waiting inside you this whole time. The 25-year-old watching manifestation TikToks doesn't have what you have. They haven't buried anyone they love. They haven't survived real failure. They haven't felt the weight of decades of unfulfilled potential. They're still chasing surface wins, still performing for approval, but you know what matters. You know what's real. You've got clarity they won't have for another 20 years. And clarity is the key that unlocks the G-force. The Masons understood this. That's why their system required maturity. You can't skip to wisdom. You have to earn it, and you've earned it. Now it's time to use it. Because here's the truth they never told you. You're not too old. You're finally old enough. Okay, let's talk about how this actually works. Not theory, not a metaphor. The mechanics. Because the G-force isn't magic. It's a circuit, a sequence, a pattern of internal operations that, when aligned correctly, produces tangible results in the physical world. The Freemasons encoded this in their symbols because they knew something crucial. Nothing happens without energy flow. And the energy that creates reality doesn't come from your thoughts alone. It comes from a specific sequence that starts deep in your emotional core. Here's the circuit. Care becomes thought. Thought shapes imagination. Imagination gives rise to emotion. Emotion fuels the will. The will drives action. And action leads to manifestation. Let me break that down in a way that'll make perfect sense. Step 1. Care, the ignition point. Nothing, and I mean nothing, happens unless you care about it first. Not surface level, that would be nice, care. Deep, visceral, body level care. Think about it. You don't act on random thoughts. You act on what matters to you, what grabs you, what you can't ignore. That's the fire. That's the fuel. And here's the brutal truth. Most people over 45 have stopped caring deeply about things. Not because they're dead inside, but because life beat it out of them. They learned that caring leads to disappointment, that dreams don't come true, that hoping hurts, so they shut it down. They went numb. They traded passion for safety, and when you stop caring, you stop creating. Your G-force goes dormant because there's no fuel in the tank. Let me tell you about Frank. He's not real, but you probably know him. Matter of fact, you might be him. Frank is 52, insurance adjuster. Been doing it for 28 years. He's good at his job, reliable, shows up, gets it done. But if you ask Frank what he cares about, he'll pause, he'll think. And eventually he'll say something like, my family, or doing a good job. Safe answers, true enough, but hollow. Because Frank stopped caring about himself somewhere around age 35. He cared about being a good husband, a good father, a good employee. But Frank the man? Frank's desires, Frank's dreams, those got shelved, filed away, labeled selfish and forgotten. And now Frank moves through life on autopilot. He does what he's supposed to do. He feels what he's supposed to feel. But there's no fire, no fuel, no care. His G-force isn't just dormant, it's starved. And here's the thing. Frank doesn't even know it. He thinks this flatness is just part of getting older. This numbness is just maturity. This resignation is just wisdom. But it's not. It's what happens when you abandon yourself to meet everyone else's expectations. And if that hits you in the chest, good. Because that's your body telling you it's time to care again. So the first step isn't visualization. It's not affirmations. It's this. You have to find what you still care about. What still makes your chest tighten? What still pisses you off? What would you fight for if you had the energy? Find that. Because that's your power source. Step 2. Thought. The blueprint. Once care is activated, thought follows. But not scattered, anxious, repetitive thought, directed thought. The kind of thinking that says, if I care about this, then what does success look like? What needs to happen? This is where most people get stuck. They care, but their thoughts are chaotic, contradictory, self-sabotaging. I want financial freedom, but I'm too old to start over. I want a better relationship, but I'm probably too damaged. I want to feel alive again, but it's too late for me. Those aren't thoughts, those are programs. Old code, inherited beliefs. Here's what most people don't realize. 95% of your thoughts are not yours. They're your father's, your mother's, your third-grade teachers, the news anchors, the preachers. They're downloads from decades of conditioning. And as long as that's running, the circuit shorts out before it even starts. The Masons had a practice they called guarding the threshold. It meant be vigilant about what enters your consciousness. Not just information, not just media, thoughts themselves, because they understood that thoughts are not neutral. They're seeds. And whatever seeds you plant in your subconscious through repetition will eventually grow into your reality. So, here's the discipline. Thought must serve care, not sabotage it. Every time you catch yourself thinking a limiting thought, you don't argue with it. You don't analyze it. You simply replace it with a directed thought that aligns with what you actually care about. Example. Limiting thought. I'm too old to change careers. Directed replacement. My experience is an asset. I have clarity younger people don't have. I know what I want now. Do this 100 times a day if you have to. Your subconscious doesn't care if it's true. It cares about what you repeat. Step 3. Imagination, the hologram. This is where the Masons got esoteric, but for good reason. Imagination isn't daydreaming, it's not fantasy. Imagination is your mind's ability to pre-create reality in vivid sensory detail. Here's what neuroscience has now confirmed. When you imagine something, really imagine it with feeling. Your nervous system can't tell the difference between imagination and memory. Your brain fires the same neural patterns. Your body releases the same chemicals. That's why athletes use visualization. That's why surgeons mentally rehearse procedures. Because imagination programs the nervous system. And when your nervous system believes something is real, your behavior automatically adjusts to match it. The Masonic technique, living from the end. Neville Goddard, who studied Masonic principles deeply, taught this. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not, I'm trying to get there. Not, I hope this happens. But it's already done. You don't imagine yourself winning the race. You imagine the moment after you've won. The feeling, the relief, the satisfaction. You don't imagine getting the money. You imagine what it feels like to already have it. To check your account and see the number. To pay for something without anxiety. This isn't positive thinking. This is nervous system reprogramming. Because your subconscious operates on one rule. Whatever feels for action. And when your imagination makes something feel real, your body starts moving toward it automatically. Step 4. Emotion, the amplifier. Here's where it all comes together. Emotion is not noise, it's not weakness, it's the power supply. Think of emotion as the electrical charge that makes everything else come alive. You can think about wealth all day. You can imagine it. But if there's no feeling behind it, if it doesn't move you, nothing happens. The Freemasons knew this. That's why their rituals were designed to create emotional impact, drama, symbolism, charged moments, because emotion imprints, emotion rewrites, emotion commands. Here's the science. When you experience a strong emotion, your brain releases neurochemicals that signal, this is important, remember this, prioritize this. That's why you remember exactly where you were on September 11th. Why you remember your wedding day. Why trauma sticks. High emotion equals high importance to your nervous system. So if you want the G-force to activate, you need to practice feeling the reality you're building before it shows up. Not fake positivity. Real emotional resonance. Here's why most people fail here. They try to manifest from a state of lack. They visualize money while feeling broke. They imagine love while feeling unlovable. They picture success while feeling like failures. And their nervous system says, yeah, nice story. But this other feeling is what's actually real. The subconscious always believes the emotion, not the words. So you have to generate the emotional state first, then let imagination and thought reinforce it. How? Simple. Remember a time when you felt powerful, confident, abundant, alive. Doesn't matter if it was 30 years ago. Doesn't matter if it only lasted 5 minutes. Your nervous system stored that feeling. You can access it right now. Close your eyes. Breathe. Remember. Let that feeling fill your body. That's the frequency the G-force responds to. Step 5. Will. The executor. This is where men over 45 have a massive advantage. Will isn't motivation. Motivation is fleeting. Will is the capacity to act regardless of how you feel in the moment. And if you've survived decades of life, raised kids, paid bills, endured loss, kept going when everything fell apart, you already have will. You just forgot how to aim it. The G-force activates fully when will becomes intentional, not reactive, not desperate, not grinding for approval, but clear, committed, directional action toward what you actually care about. In Masonic teaching, will isn't force, it's alignment. It's the moment when your desire, your thought, your emotion, and your action all point in the same direction. When that happens, movement becomes effortless. Not because it's easy, but because it's coherent. There's no internal resistance. No part of you fighting another part. You become like water flowing downhill. Inevitable. That's what the Masons trained for. That's what the degrees built toward. Unified will, coherent intention, complete internal alignment. And when you achieve that, reality doesn't resist you anymore. It responds to you. Step 6. Action. The bridge. This is non-negotiable. The circuit doesn't complete until you move. Not perfect action, not massive action. Just aligned action. One decision, one conversation, one boundary. One choice that says, I'm done waiting. I'm moving now. Because here's the law that nobody talks about. The universe doesn't respond to your thoughts. It responds to your movement. Think about it. You can pray for a job, but if you don't apply, nothing happens. You can visualize health, but if you don't change what you eat, nothing changes. You can imagine wealth, but if you don't take the call, make the offer, have the conversation, it stays imagination. Action is the bridge between the invisible and the visible, between potential and actual, between thought and thing. And here's what the Masons knew. Small, aligned action creates momentum faster than big, misaligned action. You don't need to overhaul your entire life tomorrow. You need to take one step today that proves to yourself, I'm serious now. That's all. One aligned action breaks the spell of inertia. And once momentum starts, the G-force takes over. Step 7. Manifestation, the reflection. This is where people get confused. Manifestation isn't magic appearing out of nowhere. It's the inevitable result of running the full circuit consistently. When care fuels thought, thought directs imagination. Imagination charges emotion. Emotion activates will. Will drives action. Reality has to shift, not because you're special, because that's how the system works. It's a law, like gravity, like thermodynamics. The Freemasons didn't discover magic. They discovered mechanics. And now you have the map. But here's the part they don't tell you in the manifestation videos. Manifestation often looks nothing like you expected. You visualize a specific job, but what shows up is a random connection that leads to something better. You imagine money coming from your business, but it comes from an unexpected refund, an old debt repaid, a gift. You picture your relationship healing one way, but it heals through a completely different conversation than you rehearsed. The G-force doesn't care about your specifics. It cares about your frequency. If your frequency says abundance, abundance shows up, but through whatever pathway is most efficient. If your frequency says love, love appears, but maybe not from the person you were fixated on. This is why control freaks struggle with manifestation. They want it their way, on their timeline, through their chosen method. But the universe is smarter than your plan. And once you learn to trust the circuit, instead of trying to micromanage the outcome, that's when miracles become normal. The question is, will you run the circuit? Let's get real for a second. If you're watching this, there's a good chance something in your life isn't working the way you thought it would by now. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe it's your health, your energy, your sense of purpose. Or maybe it's something harder to name. Just this quiet, nagging feeling that you're not living the life you were supposed to live. I'm not talking about a life crisis. That's your internal system trying to wake you up. Here are the signs your G-force has been dormant and what they actually mean. Sign 1. You have ambitions but don't move. You know what you want. You've thought about it for years. Start the business. Write the book. Travel more. Get in shape. Leave the toxic situation. But you don't do it. You research. You plan. You tell yourself, soon. Meanwhile, years pass. This isn't laziness. This is a will failure. The circuit between thought and action is severed. And here's why it happens. At some point, probably in your 20s or 30s, you tried something and it didn't work out. Maybe you started a business and it failed. Maybe you put yourself out there and got rejected. Maybe you took a risk and got burned. And your nervous system learned action equals pain. So now, even though you consciously want to move, your subconscious is protecting you by keeping you frozen. It's not that you can't act. It's that your system believes action will hurt you. That's the wound. And until you heal it, you'll stay stuck in planning mode forever. Sign 2. You feel numb more than you feel alive. Remember when things excited you? When you felt passion, fire, intensity. Now everything feels flat, manageable, fine. You're not depressed in the clinical sense. You're just not here. This is care depletion. The fuel source of the G-force has run dry because you've been living in survival mode for so long, you forgot what it feels like to want something deeply. Why this happens to men? Over 45. Society trains men to be providers, protectors, performers. Your value is tied to what you do for others, how much you produce, how well you provide. So you spend decades giving, sacrificing, putting everyone else first. And somewhere along the way, you stopped asking, what do I want? Not what your wife wants, not what your kids need, not what your boss expects. What do you want? Most men over 45 can't answer that question without feeling guilty or selfish. And that guilt is the prison. Because the G-force can't activate around someone else's desires. It only activates around yours. And women, you're not off the hook either. The trap is just as real, just differently disguised. Society trained you to be nurturers, caretakers, peacekeepers. Your value was tied to how well you kept everyone happy, how smoothly you made life run for everyone else, how little you asked for yourself. So you spent decades managing everyone's emotions, but your own, anticipating everyone's needs, but ignoring yours, making yourself smaller so others could be comfortable. And somewhere along the way, you stopped asking, what do I actually want? Not what your husband needs, not what your kids demand, not what your parents expect, not what society says a good woman should want. What lights you up? What makes you feel alive? What would you do if no one was watching or judging? Most women over 45 can't answer that question without immediately thinking of 10 reasons why it's impossible, impractical, or irresponsible. I can't focus on myself, what about everyone else? And that right there, that's the cage. Because the G-force doesn't activate through martyrdom. It doesn't respond to self-sacrifice disguised as love. It activates when you finally give yourself permission to want something for you, unapologetically, fiercely, without shrinking. Sign 3, you know the truth but don't apply it. You've read the books, watched the videos, learned the lessons. You know what you need to do. You understand the principles, but you don't live them. You consume information and then go right back to the same patterns. This is imagination disconnect. You can't see yourself actually being that person, so the knowledge stays theoretical. Here's what's really happening. You have two versions of yourself. The one you know you could be, confident, decisive, powerful, free. And the one you believe you are, stuck, limited, past your prime, too late. And your belief always wins, because your subconscious won't let you become someone you don't believe you can be. It's not self-sabotage, it's self-protection. Your nervous system thinks, if I become that person, I won't recognize myself. I'll lose my identity. I'll be alone. So it keeps you where you are, not because it's good, but because it's familiar. Sign 4. You're scattered, distracted, reactive. Your attention is everywhere and nowhere. Phone notifications, news cycles, other people's drama, endless scrolling. You start things and don't finish them. You want focus but can't hold it. This isn't ADD, this is G-force fragmentation. Your creative energy is leaking in 1,000 directions instead of flowing toward one clear target. And here's the brutal truth about why this happens. Focus requires saying no to almost everything. But you were trained to say yes, to be nice, to not disappoint people, to be available. So you scatter yourself across 100 low-priority tasks to avoid the one high-stakes thing that actually matters. It's not time management, it's fear management. You're avoiding the one thing that would change everything because changing everything is terrifying. Sign 5. You struggle with follow-through. You start strong. New Year's energy, fresh intentions, then 2 weeks in you quit, or plateau, or find an excuse. This isn't weakness. This is emotional inconsistency. Your feeling state is driving the car, not your will. When you feel good, you move. When you don't, you stop. That's not power. That's being a passenger in your own life. Here's the neuroscience behind this. Your brain operates on 2 systems. System 1, fast, emotional, automatic. This is your limbic system, your inner child. System 2, slow, rational, deliberate. This is your prefrontal cortex, your inner adult. Most people live in System 1. They're run by their feelings. Happy equals productive. Anxious equals paralyzed. Angry equals destructive. But the G-force only activates when System 2 is in command. When your will overrides your mood. When your decision matters more than your feeling. When you act because you chose to, not because you feel like it. That's mastery. That's sovereignty. And that's what the Masons spent years training. Sign 6. You feel like you're waiting for permission. Permission to speak up. Permission to charge more. Permission to want more. Permission to leave. Permission to start. You're stuck in an invisible hierarchy where someone else has to approve your next move. This is authority displacement. You never activated your own G-force, so you're still running on external validation. You are socialized to seek status through hierarchy. You learn early. There are people above you, people below you, and your job is to climb. But here's the trap. The ladder is a lie. There is no top. There's just an endless series of people you're trying to impress. Your boss, your father or mother, your peers, society. And as long as you're seeking their approval, your G-force stays dormant. Because the G-force only activates when you give yourself permission. When you stop asking, can I? And start declaring, I will. Sign 7. Life feels like it's happening to you. Bills, problems, responsibilities, demands. You're reacting, managing, coping, surviving, but you're not creating, you're not steering. This is the ultimate sign. Complete G-force dormancy. You've been in passenger mode so long you forgot you even have a steering wheel. Now here's what most people do when they see themselves in that list. They blame themselves, they feel shame, they think they're broken. But listen carefully, you are not broken. Your G-force is just asleep. And the reason it's asleep is because no one ever taught you how to wake it up. You weren't trained in emotional mastery. You weren't trained in will building. You weren't trained in conscious imagination or intentional care direction. You were trained to obey, to survive, to fit in. And now, decades later, you're waking up to the cost of that training. But here's the beautiful part. The G-force doesn't care how long it's been dormant. It's not atrophied. It's not gone. It's not too late. The moment you start running the circuit again, the moment you start practicing the system, it comes back online. Not in a year, not when you're ready. Immediately. And that's what we're about to do. All right? No more theory. No more diagnosis. You're here because you're done talking about it. You're ready to do something. So let's activate this thing. These aren't tips. These aren't suggestions. These are initiations, practices that systematically turn the G-force back on, step by step. And unlike most self-help garbage, these are designed for people who've already lived a life, who have responsibilities, who don't have time for 90-day challenges or monk mode. You can start tonight, you can start tomorrow, and you'll feel the shift within days. Initiation 1. The care audit, restoring the fuel. Most people don't know what they actually care about anymore because they've been living on autopilot for decades. So here's the first practice. Every morning for the next 7 days, write down 3 things you genuinely care about. Not what you should care about, not what sounds good. What makes your chest tighten? What pisses you off? What would you defend? Examples. I care that my kids learn to respect themselves, not just obey. I care that I'm not invisible in my own life anymore. I care that I wasted 20 years, and I refuse to waste another day. I care that I build something that outlasts me. I care that I stop lying to myself about being fine. This isn't journaling. This is ignition. You're locating your fuel source again. Once you see what you actually care about, everything else becomes clear. In the first degree of Masonry, the initiate is asked, what do you seek? Most answer, light, truth, knowledge. But the real answer is myself. Because until you know what you care about, not what you were told to care about, you're living someone else's life. This practice brings you back to yourself. Initiation 2. The one thought discipline, cleaning the signal. Your thoughts are not you. They're programs. Most of them were installed before you were 10 years old and haven't been updated since. Here's how you start upgrading. Pick one empowering thought and repeat it 100 times today. Not 50. Not whenever you remember. 100. Set a timer if you have to. Make tick marks on a piece of paper. Count it out. Examples. I am capable of creating what I want. I trust myself to figure this out. My energy is mine to command. I am the author of my reality. Age is advantage, not limitation. Why 100 times? Because repetition is how you overwrite old code. Your subconscious doesn't argue with volume. Think about advertising. Coca-Cola doesn't run one commercial and hope you remember. They run thousands until Coke equals happiness is burned into your neural wiring. You're doing the same thing, but with thoughts that actually serve you. The science behind this. Your brain has something called neuroplasticity, the ability to rewire itself based on repeated input. Every time you repeat a thought, you strengthen that neural pathway. Do it 100 times in one day. You create a highway. Do it for 30 days straight, it becomes your new default thinking pattern. That's not manifestation woo-woo. That's neuroscience. Initiation 3. The evening imprint, imagination training. Before bed, after you're done scrolling, after everything's quiet, you have a 10-minute window when your subconscious is most receptive. This is when you install new reality. Here's how. Close your eyes. Breathe slowly. Then imagine in vivid sensory detail yourself already living the reality you're building, not trying to get there, not working toward it, already there. What do you see? What do you hear? How does your body feel? Example. If you're building financial freedom, don't imagine getting rich. Imagine waking up and checking your account. What number do you see? Imagine buying something you want. What does it feel like to not worry about the price? Imagine telling your spouse, "We're good." How does their face look? Stay in that image until it feels real, until your nervous system believes it. Do this every night for 30 days and watch how your external behavior starts matching that internal image. Why does the evening matter? Your subconscious is most programmable in 2 states. 1. Right before sleep, theta brainwave state. 2. Right after waking, also theta. That's when your critical mind is offline and your subconscious is listening directly. The Masons knew this. That's why they performed rituals at specific times. That's why monks meditate at dawn and dusk. Timing matters. Initiation 4. The emotional reset, stopping the leak. Most people over 45 are emotionally exhausted, not because life is hard, but because they're leaking energy everywhere. To news, to arguments, to other people's problems, to resentment about the past. Here's the practice. Twice a day, morning and night, sit in silence for 5 minutes and name every emotion you're carrying. Not analyze it, not fix it, just name it. I feel angry. I feel scared. I feel resentful. I feel tired. I feel ashamed. I feel disappointed. Then breathe deeply and say, I release what doesn't serve my highest reality. You're not suppressing, you're draining the overflow so your emotional system can run clean again. Why this works? Emotions are energy, specifically energy in motion. But when you suppress them or ignore them, they don't disappear, they get stuck. Stuck emotion becomes chronic tension in your body, intrusive thoughts in your mind, reactive behavior you can't control. Simply naming the emotion releases about 40% of its charge immediately. That's UCLA research, not pseudoscience. And when you consciously release it, you clear space for the emotions that actually fuel creation. Clarity, desire, determination, joy. Initiation 5. The will-building ritual, training the executor. Will is a muscle, and like any muscle, it atrophies when you don't use it. Here's how you rebuild it. Every single day, do one thing you don't want to do, but know you should do. Not huge, just one. Examples: cold shower for 60 seconds. 10 push-ups even though you're tired. Call someone you've been avoiding. Say no to something you usually say yes to. Have the uncomfortable conversation. Make the decision you've been delaying. This isn't about the task. It's about proving to your nervous system, I am the one in command here. Not my feelings, not my habits, me. Do this daily for 21 days and you'll notice something wild. Other areas of your life will start moving too. Why? Because will is universal. Once it's activated in one area, it flows everywhere. The Masons had a saying, to know, to dare, to will, to keep silent. Most people focus on knowledge, to know. Some work on courage, to dare. But very few develop will, to will. And will is what separates those who dream from those who build. Knowledge without will is just information. Courage without will is just recklessness. Will is the hinge, the executor. The force that says, regardless of circumstances, I move. Initiation 6. The circulation practice, proving trust. Money, energy, opportunity. It's all the same thing, flow. And flow stops when you operate from scarcity. Here's a simple but powerful practice. Once a week, give something valuable away. Money, time, knowledge, with zero expectation of return. Not charity, not obligation. Circulation. Examples. Tip extra at a restaurant. Pay for someone's coffee behind you. Share knowledge you usually gatekeep. Give your time without resentment. Spend money on something generous without fear. You're proving to yourself and the field, I trust the flow. I know more is coming. I don't operate from lack. This rewires your scarcity programming at the root level. Welcome to energy economics. Here's what most people don't understand about wealth. It's not about how much you make. It's about your relationship with circulation. You can make $200,000 a year and feel broke if you hoard from fear. You can make $50,000 and feel wealthy if you circulate with trust. Wealth is a feeling, not a number. And the feeling comes from internal trust, not external bank balance. When you give freely, when you circulate energy without grasping, you send a message to your subconscious. I'm not scarce. I'm not afraid. I trust myself to generate more. And your subconscious responds by making you more generative. Initiation tentasil. The physical anchor. Embodiment. Your body is not separate from your mind, it's part of the circuit. So here's the final practice. Stand in front of a mirror once a day, look yourself in the eye, and say aloud, I am the architect of my reality. Say it like you mean it, even if it feels ridiculous, especially if it feels ridiculous, because your subconscious is watching. And when you speak with conviction, when your voice, your posture, your eye contact all align, your body starts to believe it. Why speaking it aloud matters. There's a principle in neuroscience called proprioception, your brain's sense of where your body is in space. When you stand tall, look yourself in the eye, and speak with authority, your proprioceptive system sends signals to your brain. This person is confident. This person is certain. This person is in command. And your brain starts treating you like that person. It's the same reason military training involves posture, voice control, and eye contact. Because your body shapes your mind just as much as your mind shapes your body. Here's the truth. You don't need all 7 initiations. You need one. Pick the one that hit you hardest and do it religiously for 30 days. Not when you feel like it. Not when it's convenient. Every single day. Because the G-force doesn't activate through information. It activates through repetition, through practice, through discipline, through choosing over and over to become the person who lives from power instead of pattern. And once it's on, everything changes. Not slowly, immediately. You'll notice it first in small things. Decisions come faster. Confidence feels easier. Synchronicities increase. Energy returns. And then the big things start shifting. Opportunities appear. Money flows differently. Relationships improve or end. Both are good. Your entire life reorganizes around your new frequency. That's not magic. That's what happens when you stop broadcasting "I'm stuck" and start broadcasting "I'm sovereign." Let's talk about why this isn't just motivational fluff. Because if you're over 45, you've heard enough gurus. You've seen enough hype. You don't need faith, you need evidence. So here it is. The neuroscience. Your brain is programmable. Your brain has something called the reticular activating system, RAS. It's a filter. It decides what information gets through to your conscious awareness and what gets ignored. Right now, your RAS is tuned to notice problems, threats, and evidence of limitation. Because that's what you've been focused on for years. But here's the key. Your RAS is programmable. When you repeat thoughts, images, and emotions consistently through the practices we just covered, You're literally rewiring what your brain pays attention to. You start noticing opportunities instead of obstacles. You start seeing possibilities instead of dead ends. It's not magic, it's selective attention. Here's a real example. Two people walk into the same room. Person A's RAS is programmed for scarcity. They notice broken chair, stained carpet, flickering light. They leave thinking, this place is falling apart. Person B's RAS is programmed for possibility. They notice high ceilings, good bones, natural light. They leave thinking, this has potential. Same room, different programming, different reality. That's what you're doing with these practices, reprogramming what you see. It's called the biology of emotion. Your body keeps the score. Your emotions aren't just feelings, they're chemical signals. When you practice emotional regulation, like the reset practice, you're training your nervous system to stop living in fight or flight mode. You're shifting from cortisol dominance, the stress hormone, keeps the body locked in chronic anxiety, inflammation, and mental fog. Shifting into dopamine and oxytocin, the hormones of reward and connection, brings clarity, energy, and emotional openness. And when your body feels safe, when it's not constantly bracing for disaster, your higher brain functions come online. Creativity, problem-solving, decision-making, intuition. That's why people who master their emotional state seem to get lucky. They're not lucky, they're available. Their system is open to receive because it's not locked in survival mode. Here's the psychology of will. Prefrontal override. Will isn't mystical. It's your prefrontal cortex overriding your limbic system. In simple terms, it's your rational mind saying we're doing this even when your emotional mind says, I don't feel like it. Every time you practice will building, like doing the thing you don't want to do, you strengthen that neural pathway. You're literally training your brain to trust your decisions over your moods. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. That's neuroplasticity, the Masonic insight. Ritual rewrites reality. Here's where the Freemasons were centuries ahead. They encoded these principles into ritual because they understood something neuroscience is only now confirming. Repetition plus emotion plus symbolism equals subconscious reprogramming. Their degrees, their symbols, their ceremonies, it was all designed to create charged moments that would imprint on the initiate's mind. Not through information, through experience. That's why rituals work. That's why the practices I gave you work. Because your subconscious doesn't learn through logic. It learns through 1. Repetition, doing it daily. 2. Emotion, feeling it deeply. 3. Embodiment, physically acting it out. The Masons knew this 300 years ago. Now you do too. And finally, the part that sounds the most esoteric, but is increasingly backed by quantum physics. Your consciousness is not isolated. It's entangled with the field around you. When you change your internal state, when you activate the G-force through consistent practice, you're not just changing your thoughts, you're changing your broadcast. And the field, call it the universe, call it probability, call it God, responds to coherent signals. What science is now confirming. Princeton's Peer Lab spent 28 years studying this. They found human intention measurably affects random systems. Not sometimes, consistently. When people focused their intention coherently, random number generators became less random. That's peer-reviewed science, not woo-woo. And if consciousness can affect machines, what do you think it's doing to your life? When your thoughts, emotions, and actions are aligned, when you're running the full circuit, you become a coherent transmitter. And coherent transmitters don't just hope for change. They magnetize it. Again, not magic. Physics. Here's the historical evidence. Every major figure who understood this achieved extraordinary results. Not through luck, through application of these principles. Benjamin Franklin, Mason. Daily journaling practice, emotional regulation, systematic self-improvement. Built himself into a founding father. Napoleon Hill. Studied these principles for 20 years. Interviewed 500 successful men. Wrote Think and Grow Rich, which is basically the G-force circuit in book form. Nikola Tesla. Used visualization so vividly he could test inventions in his mind before building them. Said he could see his machines operating perfectly before they existed. These weren't special people. They were normal people who learned the system. The same system you now have access to. So when you do these practices, you're not playing make-believe. You're engaging with the actual operating system of human consciousness. The same system the Masons studied. The same system mystics discovered. The same system science is now validating. And it works. Not because you're special, because it's law. Okay. It's time to stop pretending. You've made it this far. You've heard the system, you understand the mechanics. But here's what happens next for 95% of people. They watch this video. They nod along. They feel inspired, and then they do nothing. They go right back to scrolling, right back to waiting, right back to the same loops that have kept them stuck for years. And in 6 months, they're right back here, watching another video, reading another book, looking for another answer. But the answer isn't new information. The answer is applying what you already know. So let me be brutally honest with you. If you don't change now, you won't change later. There's no right time. There's no perfect moment. There's no day when you'll suddenly feel ready. You're either someone who acts or you're someone who waits. And waiting is a life sentence. Think about it. How long have you been waiting to be ready? How many years have you told yourself next year? How many decades have passed while you were getting things in order first? That's not preparation. That's avoidance. And every year you delay, the pattern gets deeper. Time is not on your side. You're not 15 anymore. You don't have decades to figure it out. Let's do the math. If you're 50 right now, you've got maybe 30 to 40 years left if you're lucky. But how many of those years will be high energy years? 20, maybe 25? And how many of those years do you want to spend stuck in the same patterns that have kept you small for the last 25? Every year you stay stuck is a year you don't get back. Every month you delay is a month you're still living below your capacity. Every week you stay in the same patterns, those patterns get deeper. That's not fear-mongering. That's biology, neuroscience, reality. The older you get, the harder it is to rewire. Not impossible, but harder. So if you're going to do this, do it now. Because whether you realize it or not, your kids are learning how to live by watching you. Not by what you say, by what you do. If they see you stuck, they learn that being stuck is normal. If they see you settling, they learn that settling is acceptable. If they see you afraid, they learn that fear is the default. If they see you complaining but never changing, they learn that complaining is easier than action. But if they see you change, if they watch you activate your power, take control, transform your reality, they learn that it's possible. You're not just doing this for you, you're doing it for the next generation. Remember Frank from earlier? The 52-year-old insurance adjuster. Here's what happened to him. Frank watched videos like this, read books, listened to podcasts, understood the principles, but he never applied them. Why? Because he told himself, Nikat, I'll start when work slows down. It never did. I'll do this when the kids are older. They grew up. Nothing changed. I'll make the change when I have more money saved. He never saved enough. And now Frank is 67, retired, financially okay, physically declining. And he sits in his recliner every evening watching TV, wondering, what if I had actually done something? Not when he was 67, when he was 52, when he still had energy, time, options. That's the silent tragedy of men who know but don't act. They don't die dramatic deaths. They just fade into regret. Don't be Frank. Because the pain of staying the same will eventually outweigh the pain of change. Right now, change feels scary, uncertain, risky. But here's what most people don't realize until it's too late. The pain of staying the same compounds. Every year of unfulfilled potential adds up. Every year of quiet resentment builds. Every year of knowing you could be more but aren't becomes unbearable. And eventually you reach a breaking point. The question is, do you wait until you break? Or do you choose to change now, while you still have energy, time, and options? Nobody's coming to save you. Not your kids, not your spouse, not the government, not the market, not luck, not God. At least not the way you think. You're the only one who can activate your G-force. And if you're waiting for external conditions to change before you start, if you're waiting for more money, more time, more clarity, you'll be waiting forever. Because external conditions don't create internal activation. Internal activation creates external conditions. That's the order, and you can't reverse it. The universe doesn't reward intention. It rewards action. You can want it. You can hope for it. You can pray for it. You can visualize it. You can journal about it. But until you move, nothing changes. And the practices I gave you, they're not complicated. They're not time-intensive. They're simple, practical, doable tonight. The care audit takes 5 minutes. The one thought discipline happens throughout your day. The evening imprint takes 10 minutes before sleep. The emotional reset takes 5 minutes twice a day. The will-building ritual is one small action daily. The circulation practice is once a week. The physical anchor takes 2 minutes. Total daily time investment, maybe 30 minutes. You spend more time scrolling social media before breakfast. So the question isn't, do I have time? The question is, am I willing to prioritize my power over my patterns? Here's what happens if you don't. Let me paint you a picture. 5 years from now, you're sitting in the same chair watching another video like this. You're 5 years older. 5 years more tired. 5 years deeper in the patterns. And you're thinking the same thought you're thinking right now. I should really do something about this. But you won't. Because you didn't do it this time either. And the gap between who you are and who you could have been gets wider. Until eventually, you stop even thinking about it. You accept the limitation as permanent. You call it being realistic. You tell yourself, I'm too old now anyway. And you spend your final decades watching other people live while you shrink into the background of your own life. That's not a scare tactic. That's what happens when you know, but don't act. Here's the final truth. The G-force activates the moment you decide it's time. Not when you're ready, not when you're sure, when you decide. And decision is proven through action. So what's it going to be? Another video, another book, another year of someday? Or are you done? You didn't find this video by accident. Some part of you, the part that's been waiting for decades, led you here. Because you're not done. You're not finished. You're not past your prime. You're at the exact moment where everything can shift. The Freemasons encoded the G in their symbol for a reason. Not to gatekeep it, but to protect it until people were ready to understand it. And now you do. The G-force is not a secret outside you. It's the hidden power inside you that's been waiting to be activated. It's not about what you don't have. It's not about what you missed. It's about what you do now. Because here's the truth they never taught you. The reality you experience tomorrow is being created by what you focus on, feel, and do today. Not what happened to you. Not what you were given. Not what you lost. What you choose. And choice is the ultimate power. You can choose to stay in the loop, the same thoughts, the same emotions, the same excuses. Or you can choose to activate the circuit, to restore the care, to clean the signal, to train the will, to run the system the way it was designed to run. The Masons knew this. The mystics knew this. The men who built empires and transformed lives knew this, and now you know it too. In Masonic tradition, there's a moment in the initiation ceremony where the blindfold is removed. The candidate has been in darkness, confused, uncertain, and then light. That's what this moment is. You've been in darkness for years, operating on old programming, running on autopilot. But now you see it. You understand it. The blindfold is off. And what you do next determines everything. Because knowing changes nothing. Only application changes everything. The 7 initiations are your new lodge. You don't need a secret society. You don't need a formal organization. You have everything you need right now. 1. Care audit reconnects you to your fuel. 2. One thought discipline cleans your signal. 3. Evening imprint programs your subconscious. 4. Emotional reset stops the energy leak. 5. Will building ritual activates your executor. 6. Circulation practice proves trust in flow. 7. Physical anchor embodies sovereignty. These aren't just practices, they're your degrees, your initiations. And every day you do them, you advance, not in rank, in power, in consciousness, in reality. The question is not can you. You already have everything you need. The force is already inside you. The question is, will you? Will you give yourself permission finally after all these years to stop shrinking, stop waiting, stop pretending? Will you stand up, look yourself in the mirror and say, I am done being a passenger in my own life? Will you take the first practice, just one, and commit to it for the next 30 days? Because that's all it takes. Not perfection, not massive transformation overnight. Just one practice, one decision, one commitment. And the G-force turns on. And once it's on, reality stops happening to you and starts happening through you. If you're 40, 50, 60 years old and you're thinking it's too late for me, listen to me. You're not too old. You're finally old enough. You have something 25-year-olds don't have. Earned wisdom. You know what matters. You know what's real. You're done with the bullshit. That's not a weakness. That's power. The G-force doesn't care about your age. It cares about your clarity. And you have more clarity now than you've ever had. So use it. You were never supposed to struggle this long. They told you, life is hard. That's just how it is. Keep your head down, work harder, be grateful for scraps. But that was never true. You were built for power, for purpose, for peace. You were designed to create, not just survive. You were meant to thrive, not just endure. And it's not too late to reclaim it. The Freemasons hid it in plain sight for centuries. Now it's yours. Now it's time. Now it's activated. If this transmission reached you, drop a comment below that says, G-force. Not for me, for you. Because the moment you declare it publicly, your subconscious takes note, and the circuit begins. Like this video, so the algorithm knows this message needs to reach more men who've been waiting too long. Subscribe if you're ready to go deeper, because this is just the beginning. And if you want the advanced practices, the inner circle teachings, the knowledge I only share with people who are serious, the link is in the description. No fluff, no filler, just the real work. Your transformation starts now. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Welcome back to your power. Welcome home.
Most people believe their enemy is outside them. Circumstances, other people, bad luck, fate. Buddhism says something far more unsettling. The greatest harm you will ever experience does not come from the world. It comes from the untrained mind. If your life feels heavy, scattered, repetitive, or stuck, it is not because you are cursed or incapable. It is because the same mental patterns are quietly running every day, unchecked, unquestioned, and unquestioned habits always become destiny. The Buddha did not teach comfort. He taught diagnosis. And the diagnosis is clear. When the mind is left undisciplined, it slowly dismantles your life while convincing you it is protecting you. What follows are not affirmations. They are observations. If you recognize yourself in them, that recognition is not failure. It is the beginning of wisdom. 1. The mind creates suffering by resisting reality. The first way the mind sabotages you is through resistance. Not resistance to danger, not resistance to injustice. Resistance to what has already happened. This is where most people misunderstand suffering. They believe suffering comes from pain, loss, failure, or disappointment. Buddhism dismantles this illusion completely. Pain is unavoidable. Suffering is optional. Suffering begins the moment the mind says, "This should not be happening." Notice how subtle this resistance is. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers, "This isn't fair. I shouldn't be here. I deserve better by now. If only things were different." The mind frames these thoughts as reasonable, even intelligent. But they all share the same core mistake. They argue with reality instead of responding to it. Reality does not negotiate. It does not justify itself. It does not explain. It simply unfolds. When the mind refuses to accept what is, it enters a constant state of inner conflict. This conflict drains more energy than the situation itself ever could. Think about loss. Losing a relationship hurts. That pain is real. But the prolonged suffering comes from replaying the event, rewriting it, resisting its finality. The mind keeps returning to the same scene, not to learn, but to protest. It demands an alternate version of the past. That demand is impossible to satisfy, so the suffering renews itself every time. This is why two people can experience the same event and live completely different inner lives afterward. One feels pain, adapts, and moves forward. The other becomes trapped in bitterness, resentment, and identity-level grievance. The difference is not strength or weakness, it is resistance. Over time, resistance hardens. What begins as disappointment becomes a story. The story becomes a belief. The belief becomes a personality. Eventually, the person is no longer reacting to reality. They are defending a version of themselves built around protest. This is how suffering becomes chronic. The mind tells itself it is protecting you. It claims that by resisting, you are standing up for yourself. But look closely. Resistance does not change what happened. It only ensures that what happened continues to hurt. Buddhism does not teach passive acceptance. This is where people get confused. Acceptance is not surrendering your agency. It is surrendering your argument with reality. Once the argument ends, clarity begins. When the mind stops fighting what already exists, something surprising happens. Energy returns, attention sharpens, action becomes possible. You can only respond skillfully to reality after you have fully acknowledged it. Until then, every action is distorted by emotional reactivity. Consider how resistance affects everyday life. You wake up tired and immediately think, "I shouldn't feel like this." The day hasn't even started, and the mind is already in conflict. That resistance adds tension to the body, irritability to the mood, and impatience to interactions. The fatigue itself might pass, but the mental friction stays. Or consider ambition. Many people suffer not because they lack progress, but because their mind insists they should be further ahead. They compare constantly. They replay imagined timelines. They turn growth into self-punishment. Progress becomes invisible because the mind refuses to acknowledge the present moment as valid. This refusal is devastating. It makes people blind to what they have learned, built, or survived. It replaces gratitude with impatience, and impatience erodes discipline faster than failure ever could. The Buddha's insight here is ruthless and precise. Reality is already complete. It does not need your approval. Your suffering begins the moment you demand that it be something else before you are willing to meet it. Acceptance is accuracy. It means seeing clearly, without distortion, without emotional commentary. It means recognizing this is the situation exactly as it is. From that clarity, intelligent response becomes possible. When acceptance enters, bitterness dissolves, not because the situation becomes pleasant, but because the inner war ends, and an ended war frees enormous mental resources. This is why monks are not calm because life is easy. They are calm because they are not arguing with it. Once the mind stops resisting, it can ask better questions. What is required now? What is within my control? What is the most skillful response? These questions cannot arise while the mind is busy protesting reality. Resistance keeps you emotionally anchored to the past or anxiously projected into the future. Acceptance places you fully in the present, where action actually occurs. And here is the part most people avoid. Resistance feels familiar. It feels like identity. Letting go of it can feel like losing a part of yourself. That is because many people have built their self-image around grievance, disappointment, or unmet expectations. Releasing resistance does not erase what you went through. It simply refuses to let it define you. When the mind stops saying, "This shouldn't be happening," it gains the ability to say, "This is happening, now what?" That shift is not spiritual poetry. It is psychological liberation. If there is one discipline to begin with, it is this. Every time the mind argues with reality, notice it. Do not suppress the thought. Do not follow it. Observe it. Let it pass. Reality will remain, but suffering will not. That is the first crack in the prison wall. 2. Identification with thoughts creates a false self. The second way the mind sabotages you is more dangerous than resistance because it hides in plain sight. The mind convinces you that you are your thoughts. Most people never question this. A thought appears, and it is immediately treated as truth, instruction, and identity all at once. If fear arises, I am afraid. If doubt appears, I am unsure. If anger flares, I am angry. The thought does not feel like something happening in the mind. It feels like the mind itself. Buddhism calls this ignorance, not as an insult, but as a description. Ignorance simply means not seeing clearly. Thoughts arise due to causes and conditions: memory, habit, mood, fatigue, past experience, sensory input. You did not choose most of them. They appear, linger briefly, and disappear. Yet the untrained mind treats each one as a verdict about reality and a definition of self. This is how a false self is constructed. Over time, repeated thoughts solidify into beliefs. Beliefs harden into identity. Eventually, the person no longer says, "I am having a fearful thought." They say, "I am a fearful person." A temporary mental event becomes a permanent label. This is catastrophic for growth. When you identify with thoughts, you lose distance. And without distance, there is no freedom. Every doubt becomes paralyzing. Every impulse feels urgent. Every emotional fluctuation feels like a crisis. The mind becomes a tyrant, issuing commands that feel impossible to disobey. This is why many people feel internally unstable even when their external life appears fine. Their sense of self is being rewritten every few minutes by whatever thought happens to arise. Buddhism dismantles this illusion with one brutal insight. Thoughts are not you. They are objects appearing in awareness, not the owner of it. The Buddha never said, "Stop thinking." That is impossible. He taught observation. When you observe a thought instead of merging with it, its power collapses. The thought still appears, but it no longer defines you. Consider how this plays out in daily life. A thought arises, "I'm not disciplined enough." If you identify with it, motivation collapses. You withdraw effort. You reinforce the belief. The thought proves itself true by shaping behavior. But if the thought is observed, something changes. You see it as a conditioned mental pattern, likely arising from fatigue, comparison, or past failure. It loses authority. You can act despite it. This is the difference between mental slavery and mental freedom. Identification also distorts perception. When you believe your thoughts are reality, you begin filtering the world to confirm them. If you think people don't respect you, you interpret neutral behavior as rejection. If you think you are behind in life, every success of others feels like an accusation. The mind becomes both prosecutor and judge, presenting evidence only for its own narrative. Buddhism calls this clinging to views. Once the mind clings to a view, it defends it aggressively, even when it causes suffering. Letting go feels threatening because the identity built around that view begins to dissolve. This is why people resist self-awareness. Seeing thoughts clearly threatens the false self they've been protecting. The Buddha's solution is deceptively simple but psychologically ruthless. Sit and watch the mind, not to control it, not to silence it, to see it. When you sit in stillness, thoughts reveal their true nature. They repeat, they contradict each other, they exaggerate, they fade. You begin to notice how unreliable they are. And in that noticing, trust shifts away from thought content and toward awareness itself. This shift is the beginning of stability. Without identification, emotions lose their grip. Anger still arises, but it no longer hijacks speech. Fear still appears, but it no longer dictates avoidance. Sadness comes, but it no longer defines identity. You feel fully, without being consumed. This is not detachment from life. It is intimacy without possession. The untrained mind confuses intensity with truth. Strong thoughts feel important. Loud thoughts feel urgent. Repetitive thoughts feel accurate. Buddhism exposes this mistake mercilessly. Intensity is not truth. Repetition is not wisdom. The moment you stop obeying every thought, space opens. In that space, choice appears, and where there is choice, there is dignity. This is why Buddhist discipline emphasizes mindfulness so heavily, not as relaxation, but as surveillance. You are watching the mind not to comfort it, but to prevent it from lying unchecked. The false self cannot survive observation. It requires unconsciousness. The moment thoughts are seen clearly, they lose the ability to masquerade as identity. And this is where real confidence begins. Not confidence based on positive thoughts, but confidence rooted in non-identification. You no longer need to generate good thoughts to feel stable. You are stable because thoughts no longer own you. When the mind says, "I can't do this," you hear it. You don't believe it automatically. When it says, "This will fail," you note it. You don't surrender to it. When it says, "This defines me," you see the pattern and refuse the label. You become someone who uses the mind instead of being used by it. This is not a mystical transformation, it is a practical one, and it begins with a single discipline. Every time a thought claims to define who you are, pause, observe it, let it pass. You will discover something unsettling and liberating at the same time. You were never the voice in your head. You were the one listening to it. And once you see that clearly, the sabotage begins to collapse. 3. Craving disguises itself as motivation. The third way the mind sabotages you is by convincing you that craving is progress. Most people believe their restlessness means they are ambitious, that their constant urge to improve, upgrade, achieve, or escape their current state is a sign of drive. Buddhism looks at this and says something uncomfortable. Much of what you call motivation is actually craving wearing respectable clothes. Craving is not always obvious. It does not always say, "I want pleasure." Often it says, "I just want to be better. I need to fix myself. Once I reach this point, I'll finally relax." These thoughts sound responsible, even virtuous, but underneath them is the same assumption: this moment is not enough. The mind quietly rejects the present and places fulfillment somewhere else, in the future, after success, after healing, after validation. And as long as fulfillment is postponed, peace becomes conditional. This is how the trap is built. Craving creates movement without arrival. You move constantly, but you never land. Each goal reached reveals another gap. Each improvement exposes another flaw. Satisfaction becomes brief and fragile because the mind is trained to look past it immediately. The Buddha described craving as thirst, not because wanting is immoral, but because thirst cannot be quenched by drinking salt water. The more you feed it, the stronger it becomes. Notice how this plays out internally. You achieve something you once wanted. For a moment, there is relief. Then the mind adjusts. It raises the standard. It points to someone further ahead. It whispers that this isn't enough, that more is required. This is not growth. It is dissatisfaction reproducing itself. The danger is not that you want things. The danger is that craving hijacks your sense of worth and timing. You begin measuring yourself against imagined futures. You live mentally ahead of your body. Presence dissolves. Without presence, nothing is fully experienced. Work is rushed. Rest is guilty. Relationships are half-attended. Even success feels hollow because the mind is already leaning toward the next milestone. Buddhism calls this becoming. The mind is always becoming something else, somewhere else, and in doing so, it never truly is. Craving also disguises itself as self-improvement obsession. The mind says, "I need to fix myself before I can be at peace." This sounds reasonable until you see the cost. Peace is delayed indefinitely. You become a perpetual project, never complete enough to rest. This creates quiet self-contempt. You may not say it directly, but the message is clear. Who I am right now is insufficient. That belief corrodes discipline. It turns effort into punishment instead of practice. You stop working from clarity and start working from dissatisfaction. Over time, burnout replaces progress. The Buddha did not reject effort. He rejected attachment to outcomes. Effort rooted in craving tightens the mind. Effort rooted in awareness steadies it. Here is the key distinction. Intention moves you forward. Craving drags you forward. When intention is present, you act fully in the moment, without bargaining for emotional payoff. When craving is present, every action is loaded with expectation. The moment reality fails to deliver the expected feeling, frustration appears. This is why craving produces anxiety. The mind is always checking, am I there yet? Is this working? Am I behind? That constant evaluation fragments attention and weakens resolve. Craving also distorts time. The present becomes a waiting room. Life is something that will begin later, after conditions improve. This mentality quietly robs you of years. Buddhism brings the mind back to a brutal truth. The only place life happens is now. If peace cannot exist here, it will not exist anywhere. Letting go of craving does not mean abandoning goals. It means removing emotional dependency from them. You still act, you still train, you still build, but you stop demanding that outcomes provide identity or relief. When craving loosens, something surprising happens. Focus improves, patience deepens. You stop rushing moments that require steadiness. Action becomes cleaner because it is no longer fueled by desperation. This is why monks can be disciplined without being frantic, why their effort feels grounded rather than strained. They are not chasing a future version of themselves. They are practicing fully in the present one. The mind resists this teaching fiercely. It believes that without craving, nothing will happen, that you will become passive or stagnant. This fear is unfounded. What disappears is not movement, but compulsive movement. Clarity replaces urgency. Direction replaces pressure. You begin to see that much of your exhaustion did not come from effort, but from wanting effort to save you, from wanting progress to erase discomfort, from wanting achievement to justify existence. Buddhism cuts through this illusion without mercy. You do not earn the right to be present. You are already here. You do not deserve peace later. You cultivate understanding now. When craving arises, the practice is not suppression, it is recognition. You notice the subtle rejection of the present. You see the future bargaining. You feel the restlessness in the body, and you do not obey it. You continue the action without feeding the thirst. Over time, craving weakens, not because you fought it, but because you stopped mistaking it for guidance. You learn the difference between a clear intention and a hungry mind. And in that difference, freedom grows. The mind stops running ahead of life. Life catches up to you. 4. Aversion trains the mind to escape. The fourth way the mind sabotages you is through aversion. Not hatred, not anger alone, but the constant impulse to move away from discomfort. Where craving pulls the mind toward what it wants, aversion pushes it away from what it does not want. Pain, boredom, uncertainty, effort, silence, emotional heaviness. The untrained mind treats these experiences as threats, not teachers, and the moment they appear, it looks for an exit. This is where modern suffering multiplies. Aversion does not announce itself dramatically. It feels practical, reasonable, protective. The mind says, I'll deal with this later. I just need a break. I shouldn't feel this way. Let me distract myself for a moment. But that moment becomes a habit, and that habit becomes a strategy. Over time, the mind learns a dangerous lesson. Discomfort must be escaped immediately. Buddhism sees this clearly. Discomfort is not the enemy, avoidance is. Every time you escape discomfort, the mind becomes more sensitive to it. The threshold lowers. What once felt manageable now feels unbearable. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Stillness becomes threatening. Focus becomes exhausting. Discipline feels cruel. This is how people become fragile without realizing it. Consider boredom. Boredom is not harmful. It is simply the absence of stimulation. But the modern mind cannot tolerate it. The moment boredom arises, the hand reaches for distraction. Screens, noise, endless thinking. Each escape reinforces the belief that boredom is dangerous. But boredom is where attention stabilizes. It is where deeper focus becomes possible. When boredom is constantly avoided, depth never develops. The same is true for emotional discomfort, sadness, frustration, anxiety. These are normal human states, but the mind treats them as emergencies. It rushes to fix, numb, analyze, or suppress them. In doing so, it never learns how to endure. Buddhism does not teach emotional suppression. It teaches staying. When discomfort arises, you remain present. You feel it in the body. You observe it without commentary. You do not rush to remove it. And something crucial happens. The mind learns that discomfort does not destroy you. This learning is transformative. Without it, discipline collapses. The moment effort becomes uncomfortable, the mind withdraws. The moment progress feels slow, motivation disappears. The moment practice feels dull, commitment breaks. Aversion trains inconsistency. This is why many people start strong and fade quietly. They do not fail because they lack ability. They fail because they have trained their mind to retreat at the first sign of discomfort. Buddhist training reverses this conditioning deliberately. Through meditation, the practitioner sits still while discomfort arises. Itching, restlessness, boredom, impatience. Nothing is wrong. Nothing needs fixing. The body learns to stay. The mind learns restraint. This restraint is not repression. It is strength. When aversion loosens, discomfort loses its authority. You stop treating it as a command. You feel it fully without being driven by it. From this place, endurance grows naturally. And endurance is the foundation of all meaningful change. Notice how aversion shapes identity. People begin to describe themselves as someone who can't handle stress, needs constant stimulation, or isn't disciplined. These are not truths. They are the results of repeated avoidance. What you avoid controls you. The Buddha understood this deeply. He taught that liberation does not come from seeking pleasant experiences, but from ending the compulsive need to escape unpleasant ones. When you stop running from discomfort, it changes character. It becomes information. It shows you where attachment exists. It reveals where the mind is weak. It exposes where awareness collapses. In this way, discomfort becomes diagnostic. But the untrained mind never receives this information because it never stays long enough to see it. Aversion also distorts time. Difficult moments feel endless. The mind exaggerates duration to justify escape. But when you remain present, you discover that discomfort rises, peaks, and falls on its own. It always does. This discovery builds trust. Not trust in comfort, but trust in impermanence. And once you trust impermanence, fear weakens. The mind begins to understand that it does not need to flee every unpleasant sensation. It does not need to distract itself constantly. It does not need to be entertained to remain stable. This is where inner solidity develops. Buddhism trains the mind to sit in fire without panic, not because pain is desirable, but because fear of pain is unnecessary. When aversion dissolves, effort becomes steady. You no longer quit because something feels uncomfortable. You no longer abandon practice because it feels boring. You no longer avoid silence because it feels empty. You stay. And staying changes everything. This is not a poetic idea. It is a practical one. The mind that can remain present during discomfort cannot be easily manipulated by emotion, impulse, or circumstance. It becomes reliable. And a reliable mind is the beginning of freedom. 5. Unexamined habits become unconscious destiny. The fifth way the mind sabotages you is quieter than the others, but more permanent in its damage. The mind runs on habit, and most people live inside patterns they have never examined. Buddhism is blunt about this. Your life is not shaped by what you intend, but by what you repeat. Thoughts repeated become tendencies. Tendencies repeated become actions. Actions repeated become character. Character, over time, becomes destiny. Most people never interrupt this chain. They wake up and think the same thoughts, react the same way, avoid the same discomfort, chase the same relief. At the end of the day, they wonder why nothing changes. The answer is simple and uncomfortable. Nothing changed because you didn't. The mind loves automation. Habit conserves energy. Once a response works even slightly, the mind stores it and reuses it. The problem is that what works short-term often destroys long-term clarity. For example, avoiding difficult conversations reduces anxiety in the moment. The mind records this as success. The next time discomfort appears, avoidance is triggered faster. Over time, communication weakens, relationships stagnate, and resentment builds. The original habit feels protective, but its long-term effect is isolation. This is how unconscious destiny is built. Buddhism teaches that ignorance is not lack of intelligence, it is lack of awareness. An intelligent person can still be ignorant if they never observe their own patterns. Most habits are invisible because they feel familiar. Familiarity is mistaken for normality. Normality is mistaken for identity. Eventually, people say, "That's just how I am," without realizing they are describing a habit, not a self. This is where the sabotage becomes complete. When habits run unconsciously, choice disappears. You are no longer responding to life. You are replaying it. The same triggers produce the same reactions. The same moods lead to the same behaviors. The future becomes a repetition of the past with different details. Buddhism breaks this cycle with one ruthless tool: awareness. Awareness interrupts momentum. When you see a habit clearly while it is happening, it weakens. Not because you fight it, but because it can no longer operate in the dark. Habits require unconsciousness to survive. This is why mindfulness is central to Buddhist practice, not as relaxation, but as surveillance. You are watching the mind the way a guard watches a gate. Consider anger. Most people believe anger just happens. Buddhism disagrees. Anger arises from conditions, a story, an expectation, a sense of threat. When you observe anger at its earliest stage, you see its construction. You notice the tightening in the body, the narrowing of attention, the urge to justify reaction. If you intervene there, the habit cannot complete its cycle. If you don't, it will play out exactly as it always has. The same applies to procrastination, self-criticism, distraction, and withdrawal. These are not personality traits, they are conditioned responses. And conditioning can be undone. But here is the hard truth. Habits do not change through insight alone. Seeing the pattern is necessary, but not sufficient. The mind must be trained to pause where it usually reacts. This pause is uncomfortable. It feels unnatural. It creates tension because the old habit wants completion. This is where most people fail. They notice the habit, feel the discomfort of not obeying it, and then return to it for relief. Buddhism insists on staying in that discomfort. That is the moment of rewiring. When you do not follow the habitual reaction, the mind learns something new. It learns that the urge is not fatal, that relief is not required, that another response is possible. Over time, the old habit weakens, not dramatically, but reliably. This is why Buddhist change looks slow from the outside and permanent from the inside. There is no dramatic breakthrough. There is repeated non-reaction, again and again, quietly. Unexamined habits also shape perception. If you habitually expect disappointment, you will notice evidence for it everywhere. If you habitually doubt yourself, your mind will scan for confirmation. This creates a feedback loop where belief and experience reinforce each other. The Buddha called this dependent origination. One condition gives rise to another. Thought leads to feeling. Feeling leads to craving or aversion. Craving or aversion leads to action. Action reinforces the original thought. Without awareness, this loop never breaks. With awareness, it collapses. But awareness must be practiced continuously, not once, not occasionally. Habit is relentless. So must be observation. This is why Buddhism emphasizes daily practice, not to become spiritual, but to remain conscious. The moment observation lapses, habit regains control. People often wait for motivation to change habits. Buddhism rejects this completely. Motivation is unreliable because it is emotional. Habits are changed through consistency, not inspiration. You sit, you observe, you interrupt, you repeat. Slowly, the mind becomes less reactive, less predictable, less trapped. And here is the most important point. When habits change, identity changes. Not because you adopt a new story, but because behavior reshapes perception. You begin to see yourself as someone who can pause, choose, and endure. This is how confidence is actually built, not through positive thinking, but through repeated proof of self-control. Unexamined habits create unconscious destiny. Examined habits create freedom. And freedom, in Buddhism, is not the ability to do whatever you want. It is the ability to stop doing what no longer serves clarity. That is the work. 6. Emotions are treated as orders instead of weather. The sixth way the mind sabotages you is by confusing emotion with instruction. An emotion arises, and the mind immediately treats it as a command. Act now, speak now, escape now, defend now, quit now. The feeling feels urgent, personal, and authoritative. Most people never question this authority. They obey. Buddhism sees this as one of the most destructive misunderstandings of the human experience. Emotions are not orders, they are events. They arise due to conditions, peak, and dissolve. When they are mistaken for commands, temporary states produce permanent consequences. Consider anger. Anger arises quickly and powerfully. The body tightens, the mind narrows. Words rush forward. If anger is obeyed, damage follows. Relationships fracture. Regret appears later, long after the emotion has passed. The cost remains, but the emotion is gone. This pattern repeats with fear. Fear says withdraw, avoid, delay. When obeyed, opportunities disappear. Growth stalls. The mind learns that avoidance is safety. Over time, life becomes smaller, not safer. Sadness issues a different command. Shut down, isolate, disengage. When obeyed repeatedly, sadness deepens into heaviness. Energy declines. Identity forms around withdrawal. None of these emotions are wrong. The mistake is obedience. Buddhism teaches a radically different approach. Emotions are weather patterns in the mind. They pass through awareness, change shape, and fade. You do not need to control the weather. You need to stop building your life around it. The untrained mind believes that strong emotions must be acted on immediately or they will overwhelm you. This belief is false. What overwhelms the mind is not emotion, but resistance and identification. When you allow an emotion to be present without obeying it, something unexpected happens. It weakens. Not instantly, but reliably. The mind learns that it can feel deeply without collapsing into reaction. This learning is rare in modern life because people are trained to regulate emotion through expression or suppression. Buddhism trains regulation through observation. Observation creates space. Space creates choice. Choice restores dignity. When an emotion arises and you pause, even briefly, the chain breaks. You see the urge to act. You feel the pressure. You notice the story forming, and you do nothing yet. This pause is not passive. It is powerful. In that pause, you realize something critical. Emotions demand action, but they do not require it. The demand is internal, not real. Over time, this practice transforms behavior. You stop saying things you cannot take back. You stop making decisions that serve momentary relief at the expense of long-term clarity. You stop letting moods dictate your standards. This is emotional maturity, not emotional numbness. Buddhism never taught emotional suppression. Suppression tightens the mind and stores tension. Emotions denied return with greater force. Observation allows emotion to move naturally through the system without being blocked or indulged. This is why meditation emphasizes feeling sensations directly in the body: tightness, heat, restlessness, pressure. When you stay with these sensations without narrative, emotion loses its story and becomes sensation again. A sensation cannot command you. Another sabotage occurs when people believe calm must be present before action can occur. They wait to feel motivated, confident, or centered before they begin. Buddhism rejects this sequence. Action comes first, emotion follows. When you act according to principle instead of feeling, the emotional landscape adjusts naturally. Discipline stabilizes emotion, not the other way around. This is why Buddhist training produces steadiness rather than enthusiasm. Enthusiasm fluctuates, steadiness endures. Emotional obedience also distorts self-image. People describe themselves as emotional, sensitive, or reactive, as if these were fixed traits. Buddhism sees them as habits of obedience, not inherent qualities. When you stop obeying emotion, identity loosens. You realize you are not your moods. You are the awareness that contains them. This realization changes how you relate to inner experience. Emotions are no longer enemies to fight or masters to serve. They are signals to observe. Even intense emotions lose their threat when they are not empowered by action. You can feel grief without collapsing. You can feel anger without destroying. You can feel fear without retreating. This does not make you cold, it makes you reliable. A reliable mind is one that does not break under pressure. It does not demand perfect emotional conditions to function. It remains conscious when intensity rises. Buddhism trains this reliability deliberately. Sit with discomfort, observe emotion, refuse immediate reaction, repeat. Over time, emotions lose their authority. They still arise, but they no longer govern. They inform without commanding. And that is freedom. Not freedom from emotion, but freedom from being ruled by it. When emotions stop being treated as orders, life stops being chaotic. Decisions become cleaner. Relationships become steadier. Discipline becomes possible. The mind stops reacting to weather and starts navigating the terrain. That is the shift. And it is irreversible once seen. 7. Ignorance of impermanence creates fear. The final way the mind sabotages you is by pretending that things should stay the same. This mistake sits at the root of most fear, anxiety, and grief. The mind clings to people, states, identities, and circumstances as if permanence were possible. Buddhism names this clearly: ignorance of impermanence. Everything changes. This is not philosophy. It is observation. Bodies age. Emotions shift. Relationships evolve or end. Success rises and falls. Even the self you think you are today is not the self you were 5 years ago. And yet, the mind behaves as if stability should be guaranteed. This contradiction creates constant tension. The mind secretly demands permanence from an impermanent world. When reality fails to comply, fear appears. Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of decline, fear of the unknown. This fear is not caused by change itself. It is caused by the refusal to accept that change is unavoidable. Most people try to manage this fear by tightening their grip. They cling harder, they control more, they resist transitions. They build identities around roles, relationships, and achievements, hoping these structures will protect them from uncertainty. But clinging does not create safety. It creates fragility. The more you attach to something as permanent, the more threatening its change becomes. The mind becomes vigilant, anxious, and defensive. Peace turns conditional. I will be okay as long as this doesn't change. Buddhism exposes the impossibility of this bargain. Impermanence is not a problem to solve. It is a reality to understand. When it is not understood, the mind lives in quiet panic. When it is understood, fear loosens. Consider how this plays out emotionally. A pleasant state arises. Happiness, calm, confidence. The mind immediately tries to preserve it. It watches for signs of loss. It fears its disappearance. Ironically, this vigilance disrupts the state itself. The same happens with pain. When discomfort arises, the mind panics. It assumes permanence. This will last. I'll never escape this. The future is projected through the lens of the present feeling. Both reactions stem from the same ignorance, forgetting that everything passes. Buddhism teaches impermanence not to make life feel meaningless, but to make it workable. When you understand that states arise and pass, you stop demanding that any moment carry the weight of eternity. This understanding brings relief. Fear of loss weakens when you accept that loss is not a failure. It is a feature of existence.